I used to believe that a solid marriage was like a well-built house, one that could weather any storm as long as the foundation was strong. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 10 years, and while we weren't perfect, we were steady. Or so I thought. We had the usual ups and downs, arguments over the thermostat, disagreements about spending money, occasional silences that lasted longer than they should. But at the end of the day, I believed we were still a team. Our friends often said we were the stable couple, the ones that never seemed to be at risk of falling apart. I took comfort in that. Maybe I shouldn't have. Emily worked as a project manager for a marketing firm, and I ran a small IT consulting business from home. We had a nice life, weekend brunches, vacations to the same beach every summer, and a tradition of watching bad reality TV together on Friday nights with takeout. Familiar, predictable, comfortable. But if I had been paying closer attention, I would have noticed the small cracks before they turned into gaping holes. It started with a shift in her routine. Emily had always been punctual, almost annoyingly so. If she said she'd be home by 7, she'd walk through the door at 6:58. But then she started coming home later. Not every day, just a couple of times a week. It wasn't drastic at first, just 15 or 20 minutes past her usual time. But then 20 minutes became an hour. Then 2. When I'd ask where she'd been, she'd give me quick, reasonable answers. Had to stay late for a client meeting. Traffic was insane. Stopped for drinks with coworkers. Nothing worth arguing about. Nothing I could point to and say, that's a lie. But something felt off. Then there was the phone. Emily had never been secretive about her phone before. She'd leave it on the coffee table, in the kitchen, wherever. If it buzzed, she'd check it without hesitation. But now, she kept it close. Always face down. Always locked. I convinced myself it was nothing. That I was being paranoid. Until the night I heard her laughing. It was late after midnight. I had been working in my home office and went to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard her in the living room, whispering and giggling softly. I paused, listening. It wasn't her usual laugh, the kind she had with me when we watched terrible reality shows. It was different. Intimate. I walked into the room just as she ended the call, her fingers moving quickly to lock her phone. Who was that? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She looked up, startled. Just Sarah, she said, naming one of her co-workers. We were talking about some project deadlines. At 1 in the morning? I forced a nod. Got it. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't push. Not then. But that was the moment I knew something was wrong. And I was going to find out what. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over, the way Emily had been curled up on the couch, whispering into her phone, the way her fingers had darted to lock the screen the second she saw me. If she had nothing to hide, why did she look guilty? For the first time in 10 years of marriage, I felt something I had never felt with Emily before, suspicion. The evidence starts to pile up. The next morning, I acted normal. I kissed her on the cheek before she left for work, told her to have a good day. She smiled, but it felt forced. Then I got to work. I started small. Checked the phone bill. Normally, I wouldn't care, but now I had a reason to. That's when I noticed something odd. A number I didn't recognize kept popping up. Over and over. At all hours. Late at night. During the day when she was at work. Some calls lasted a few minutes. Some lasted almost an hour. I copied the number into Google, but nothing came up. I thought about calling it, but what would I even say? Instead, I waited. That night, Emily came home later than usual. I played it cool, made dinner, even asked her about her day. She talked, but her answers were vague. When she got up to take a shower, she left her phone on the kitchen counter. Face down. My heart pounded as I picked it up. The screen was locked, of course, but I noticed something. No notifications. Emily always got notifications. Emails, texts, calendar alerts. But now, her screen was blank. I set the phone down exactly as she had left it, my mind racing. Was she deleting everything? The breaking point. The next night, I made a decision. I needed proof. I found an old phone in my office drawer and installed a call recording app. Then, I used a burner number to text the mysterious contact from Emily's phone while she was in the shower. "Hey, are we still on for tomorrow?" The reply came almost instantly. "Of course." "Same place?" My stomach dropped. I had them. I deleted the text from Emily's phone, put it back exactly how it was, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. The confrontation I didn't expect. The next morning, I told Emily I had a client meeting and wouldn't be home for dinner. She barely reacted, just nodded while scrolling through her phone. I followed her instead. She left work at the usual time but didn't come straight home. Instead, she drove to a quiet part of town and parked outside a small cafe. I found a spot across the street and waited, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Minutes later, he arrived. A man. Mid-40s. Tall, well-dressed, confident. He walked up to Emily's car like he belonged there. She got out, and they hugged. Not the kind of hug you give a coworker. Something inside me snapped. I could have confronted her right then. Could have stormed across the street and demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took pictures. The final confirmation. I followed them to a hotel. Not a fancy one, just a standard chain hotel. She parked, and he did too. They walked inside together, laughing. I sat in my car, staring at the entrance, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. This was real. Emily, my wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, was having an affair. I gripped the steering wheel, breathing hard. I wasn't ready to go inside. Not yet. I needed more. I waited for 20 minutes. Then, I walked into the lobby. The receptionist barely glanced at me. I scanned the room, looking for them, but they were gone. Upstairs, no doubt. I thought about asking which room Emily had checked into, but I already knew. It didn't matter. I had seen enough. I walked back to my car, feeling like I had aged 10 years in the last hour. Emily was cheating. And now, I had to decide what to do about it. I didn't go home that night. After watching my wife disappear into a hotel room with another man, I couldn't bring myself to step into the house we shared, the bed we had slept in together for 10 years. Instead, I drove around aimlessly, my mind racing between anger, heartbreak, and the terrifying question, what the hell do I do now? Part of me wanted to march back to that hotel, pound on the door, and watch her squirm when she saw my face. Another part of me wanted to pretend this wasn't happening, to go home, kiss her on the cheek, and keep living the lie. I did neither. Instead, I parked in an empty lot and stared at my phone, scrolling through the pictures I had taken earlier. Emily and him hugging, laughing, disappearing into that damn hotel. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness. From rage. A plan takes shape. By the time I pulled into our driveway around midnight, I had a plan. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to break things. No, I was going to make her tell me the truth. When I stepped inside, the house was dark. Emily was already asleep. I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching her. She looked peaceful, like nothing had happened. I wanted to wake her up right then and there. Shake her. Demand answers. Instead, I turned around and went to the guest room. Let her wonder why I didn't crawl into bed beside her. Let her feel the distance. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Emily moving around in the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted through the house. For a brief moment, I forgot everything. Then I remembered the hotel. The other man. The betrayal. My jaw clenched as I got out of bed. Emily was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone like any other morning. When she looked up and saw me, she frowned. "Why'd you sleep in the guest room?" she asked, sipping her coffee. I didn't answer right away. Just sat down across from her, studying her face. Looking for any sign of guilt. I found nothing. That made me even angrier. "Late night?" I asked casually. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What?" I leaned back in my chair. "You got home later than usual yesterday." Her fingers tightened around her mug. "Yeah. I told you I had a work meeting." Lie. I let the silence stretch between us, waiting. Watching. She shifted uncomfortably. "Are you okay?" That was the moment. I could have pulled out my phone and thrown the pictures in her face. Could have told her exactly where she had been, what she had done. Instead, I decided to let her dig her own grave. I exhaled slowly. "I don't know, Em. I just feel like I don't know you lately." Her expression softened. "Steve, come on. Don't do this. We've both been busy. Work is stressful." "I get that," I said. "But it's not just work, is it?" Her eyes flickered just for a second before she covered it up with a forced smile. "What do you mean?" I tapped my fingers against the table. "I mean, you're different. Distant. And I think you're keeping something from me." She froze. A half second too long. Just enough to confirm what I already knew. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Her eyes darted around the room, like she was looking for an escape. Then she laughed. "Oh my God, Steve. Are you serious? You're acting like I'm having an affair or something." There it was. The exact moment she sealed her fate. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, Emily. I guess I am." Then I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. "Want to try again?" The lies start to crumble. Emily stared at the screen like it was a live grenade. Her face went pale. Where did you get these?" I crossed my arms. "Does it matter?" She opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked at me. Looked back at the pictures. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She laughed again. Not a real laugh. A nervous, hollow laugh. "Steve, this is ridiculous." She pushed the phone back toward me. "You're misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. I nearly lost it right then and there. "Oh? So you weren't at a hotel with another man?" Her jaw clenched. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is, Emily." My voice was sharper now. "Tell me why you've been sneaking around, lying to my face." She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, as if she was scrambling for an excuse. For the first time in my life, I saw her as a stranger. And that's when I knew. She wasn't going to admit it. She wasn't going to apologize. She was going to gaslight me until I second-guessed what I had seen with my own eyes. Not this time. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Save it, Emily. I know everything. The texts. The calls. The hotel. You're not talking your way out of this." Her face crumpled. "Steve, please." "Please what?" I snapped. "Please pretend I don't know? Please let you keep lying to me?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "That's rich. You didn't want to hurt me, but you were screwing another man behind my back?" She flinched. For a second, she looked like she wanted to deny it again. But then she sighed. And in that moment, I saw it, the guilt. The shame. The realization that she couldn't spin this anymore. I waited. And finally, she whispered. His name is Daniel. The truth, too late. She told me everything. It had been going on for 6 months. A coworker. It started as flirting, then lunches, then more. She told herself it wasn't serious, that she still loved me, that she wasn't going to leave me. Like that made it better. Like that changed the fact that she had chosen to betray me, again and again. I let her talk. Let her cry. Then I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and started packing a bag. Emily followed, panicked. Steve, wait, what are you doing? I zipped up my suitcase. What does it look like? Her voice cracked. Please, don't go. Let's talk about this. I turned to her, my chest tight, my throat burning. There's nothing left to talk about, Emily. Then I walked out the door. And I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going when I left. I just drove. The sun was setting, and the sky had that eerie orange glow that made everything look surreal, like I had stepped out of my real life and into some twisted version of it. Maybe I had. Emily had confessed. She didn't fight anymore. Didn't try to spin the story. She cheated. And now, I was alone in my car with a bag of clothes and no real plan. The logical thing would have been to go to a hotel. Maybe crash at a friend's place. But the thought of explaining what happened, of saying the words out loud, made me sick. I wasn't ready to be the guy who got cheated on. Not yet. So, I just drove. And the more I drove, the more a different thought crept into my mind. She doesn't get to walk away clean. Emily wanted to cry and apologize now? After 6 months of lying? After sneaking around with Daniel while I was sitting at home like a clueless idiot? She didn't get to wipe her tears, say she was sorry, and expect me to disappear quietly. No. She was going to feel this. She was going to know exactly what it was like to have your life ripped out from under you. And I knew exactly how to do it. Step 1: Gathering ammunition. I pulled into a parking lot, shut off the engine, and took a deep breath. Then I started digging. Emily thought she was careful, but she wasn't that careful. I had already seen the number she had been texting and calling. Now, I wanted more. I had a buddy, Ryan, who was an absolute tech wizard. A few years ago, he helped a friend pull phone records in a nasty divorce case. I never thought I'd need that kind of help, but life had a funny way of screwing you over. I called him. Steve? What's up, man? I got straight to the point. I need a favor. A pause. What kind of favor? I swallowed. Emily's been cheating. I need everything I can get on her and this guy. Ryan was silent for a second. Then he sighed. Jesus, man. I'm sorry. You sure about this? I caught them at a hotel, I don't need to be sure, I need proof. I can pull phone records. See if she's got hidden social media accounts. Maybe check some location data. But Steve, what are you planning? I hesitated. Because honestly? I wasn't sure yet. I just need the truth, Ryan. I need to know how far this went. Ryan didn't argue. Give me an hour. Step 2: Exposing the affair. While Ryan worked, I made another call. To Daniel's wife. I had found her Facebook page months ago, back when I first started getting suspicious of Emily. I remembered thinking how normal she seemed. She had no idea that the man she married was sleeping with mine. I hesitated for a long time before dialing. But then I thought about Emily and Daniel sneaking around, laughing at my expense. I hit call. Hello? I took a deep breath. Hi. My name is Steve. I think we need to talk about your husband. Step 3: Watching it all burn. I met Daniel's wife, her name was Jessica, at a quiet little diner on the edge of town. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth, fidgeting with her napkin. She looked up when I walked in, and the second our eyes met, I saw it. She knew. She just didn't have proof. I sat down across from her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she swallowed. "It's Emily, isn't it?" I nodded. Her face crumpled. "I knew it," she whispered. She told me everything. How Daniel had been distant. How he'd started dressing nicer for work. How he suddenly had to take business trips when he never traveled for work before. She confronted him once. He denied everything. But she knew. She just didn't want to believe it. I slid my phone across the table. "You don't have to wonder anymore." She picked it up. Looked at the pictures. The hotel. The texts. Her hands started shaking. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. I exhaled. "Divorce her. Expose them. Make sure she doesn't walk away without consequences." Jessica was silent for a long time. Then she nodded. "I want in." I looked at her. "What?" She met my gaze. Her eyes were cold now. "If you're going to ruin them," she said, "I want to help." I studied her for a second. Then I smiled. Step 4: the public execution. Jessica had access to Daniel's work email. So, while Ryan pulled phone records, Jessica was digging into Daniel's inbox. And what we found? It was worse than I thought. They weren't just sleeping together. Daniel had expensed hotel stays under fake work trips. Emily had taken sick days just to spend them with him. They had a whole system. A goddamn routine. I wanted to throw up. Instead, I sent everything to Emily's boss. And Daniel's boss. And HR. And, for good measure, every single one of their close friends and family. Then I sat back and waited. Step 5: watching it crumble. Emily called me 23 times. I ignored all of them. By the time I finally answered, she was hysterical. "Steve, what did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. "What I should have done a long time ago." She sobbed. Begged. Told me she was sorry. I didn't care. She had 6 months to be sorry. Now, she got to be humiliated. Daniel got fired. Emily got suspended. Jessica kicked Daniel out. And me? I filed for divorce. And I took everything. The house? Mine. The savings account? Mine. Her reputation? Destroyed. I was done being the victim. Emily wanted to throw away 10 years of marriage for a cheap, sneaky affair? Fine. She could pay for it. And as I watched her life fall apart, I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. The first few days after I blew up Emily's life were eerily quiet. No texts. No calls. It was almost disappointing. I had expected fireworks, desperate apologies, furious accusations, some last-ditch effort to gaslight me into believing it wasn't that bad. But there was nothing. Then, on the 5th day, I got a text. "Emily, we need to talk. Please, Steve." I stared at my phone for a long time before I answered. "Me, about what?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Emily, you know what? Can we meet? Please?" I almost said no. She didn't deserve closure. She didn't deserve anything from me. But some part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. So I agreed. The meeting place. We met at a coffee shop downtown. A small, quiet place where we used to go on Sunday mornings before everything turned to shit. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she probably hadn't taken a sip from. She looked rough. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red and puffy, and there were deep shadows under them, like she hadn't slept in days. Good. She looked up when I sat down. Hi. I didn't respond. Just leaned back in my chair and folded my arms, waiting. She swallowed. You really did it. I tilted my head. Did what? Her voice shook. You ruined my life. I let out a short, humorless laugh. No, Emily. You ruined your life. I just made sure everyone else saw it too. She flinched, gripping her cup tighter. She exhaled shakily. I know I hurt you. And I deserve some of this. But, Steve, you. I cut her off. I what? Went too far? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You cheated on me for 6 months. Lied to my face. Slept with that piece of shit in my house. And now you want to act like I'm the villain? Her lip trembled. I never wanted to hurt you. My fingers curled into fists. But you did. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, Do you still love me? The question caught me off guard. For a split second, I almost lied. Almost told her I hated her, that I felt nothing but disgust. But the truth? The truth was worse. I still did love her. Or at least, I loved who she used to be. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know. Her breath hitched. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached across the table and took my hand. I didn't pull away. Not right away. Steve, she murmured. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. My jaw tightened. A mistake. A 6-month-long mistake. I yanked my hand away. Don't. Tears spilled over her lashes. I still love you. My stomach twisted. I wanted to believe her. I really, really did. But then I thought about all those nights she had spent lying to me. The phone calls. The hotel rooms. The texts. I shook my head. No, Emily. You don't. She swallowed. If I didn't, why would I be here? I exhaled slowly. Because you don't have anywhere else to go. Her face crumpled. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked quietly. Daniel lost his job. His wife kicked him out. Your friends turned their backs on you. And now you want me to pick up the pieces? She looked away. She didn't deny it. I laughed bitterly. Jesus. You really thought I'd forgive you, didn't you? She wiped her eyes. I was hoping you'd at least try to understand. Understand what? I snapped. That you were bored? That you wanted excitement? That I wasn't enough for you? Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. She didn't have to. I could see it in her face. It was about me. She had gone looking for something I couldn't give her. And that? That hurt more than anything. I stood up. We're done here. She grabbed my wrist. Steve, wait. I pulled away. Goodbye, Emily. And this time, when I walked away, I didn't look back. The final goodbye. I didn't hear from Emily again after that. I filed for divorce the next day. She didn't fight it. She packed up her things and moved in with her sister. Last I heard, she was trying to find a new job. Trying to rebuild her life. I didn't care. I had my own life to rebuild. And I was going to be just fine. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. The house was mine. The savings were mine. Emily didn't even fight for anything. She didn't have the energy. She had lost her job. Most of her friends had abandoned her. Her reputation was in the toilet. And me? For the first time in months, I felt free. Rebuilding from the ashes. The first few weeks after the papers were signed, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd spent so much time thinking about Emily, about how to expose her, how to make her pay for what she did, that when it was finally over, I felt lost. I still woke up expecting to hear her moving around the house. Still caught myself reaching for my phone to text her. Still had moments where I thought, maybe she'll call. Maybe she'll apologize again. Maybe this time she'll mean it. But she never did. And I never reached out either. Instead, I threw myself into work. I hit the gym harder than I ever had before. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had drifted away from during my marriage. I went out more. Drank more. Laughed more. And slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Running into Emily. It happened on a random Tuesday. I was grabbing groceries after work when I turned the corner and nearly bumped straight into her. Emily. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. The kind of exhaustion that sleep wouldn't fix. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then she tried to smile. Hey. I didn't say anything. She shifted awkwardly. How have you been? I looked her over. The dark circles under her eyes. The way her shoulders slumped, like she was carrying a weight she couldn't put down. And for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Not longing. Just nothing. I shrugged. I'm good. She swallowed. That's good. We stood there in silence, the ghost of everything we used to be hovering between us. Finally, she sighed. I guess I deserve this. I raised an eyebrow. Deserve what? She waved a hand vaguely between us. This. The coldness. The distance. The fact that she swallowed. That I lost you. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. More silence. Then she really looked at me. Do you hate me? She whispered. The question caught me off guard. For months, I thought I did. But standing there, staring at the broken woman in front of me, I realized. I didn't. I didn't hate her. I just didn't care anymore. I shook my head. No, Emily. I don't hate you. She blinked rapidly, like she wasn't sure whether to be relieved or devastated. I glanced down at my cart. I should go. She nodded quickly. Yeah. Yeah, of course. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Steve? I paused. Her voice was small. Are you happy? I didn't have to think about it. I looked over my shoulder and met her eyes. And then, for the first time since everything fell apart, I smiled. Yeah. I am. And I meant it. Then I walked away. For good. Moving on. I never saw Emily again after that. A few weeks later, I went on my first real date since the divorce. Her name was Claire. She was smart, funny, and had a smile that made my chest ache in a way I hadn't felt in years. And when I kissed her at the end of the night, I didn't think about Emily at all. Because my past was behind me. And my future? It was just beginning.